everyone, I'm Rishi Persad and welcome back to a new series of Racing Weekly, a podcast and YouTube show brought to you by Oddschecker in association with Bet365. On this episode, I'm joined as per usual by one of my best pals, one of the smartest minds in the sport of horse racing, Sam Turner. Later on, we're going to have a special guest, Paul Ferguson, author of Jumpers to Follow, the highly successful publication that is in demand for all jumping fans at the beginning of the season. Will be joining us a little bit later on. But first of all, as we're getting ready to go once again, and I know that we will mention it, but of course it's a long way away, but that's where we're building up to, the Cheltenham Festival. But there are a lot of good races to take in on the way there. I can say hello to Sam Turner. Sam, obviously as usual, we've got a lot to look back on, but how excited are you about the season ahead for those horses over, well, not just over obstacles, but also one or two interesting bumper runners as well?
Most definitely. Hi, Rishi. Hello, everyone. Great to be back. And you're a bit delirious this morning, Rishi, on your trip back from Kentucky. According to me, one of the smartest minds. I think you must have had a lack of sleep. But yeah, it's great to look forward to this weekend as well. We can use the C word without any recourse, because obviously it is Cheltenham. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Really good meeting as well. And we saw some decent stuff at Wincanton over the weekend for those of us that weren't sunning ourselves in Lexington, Kentucky. And we were at the coalface, really, the National Hunt coalface, in the wind, the rain down in Somerset. Exeter obviously had a really good meeting as well on Friday. We saw Greatwood there. Plenty to recap and plenty to look forward to, and great to have Paul on the first one back as well this week. Well,
it says in the script here, be complimentary about Sam, don't mention football.
Yeah, don't mention.
Did you write it?
Well, I might well have had an influence in how the script reads. Yes, definitely, Rishi. But yeah, football wouldn't be our number one topic for either of us this weekend, would it?
No, let's not talk about football. Let's talk about racing. And with that in mind, we are going into this week's racing recap. Well, of course, there was an excellent weekend of racing, Friday and Saturday at the Breeders' Cup, Sam, and a brilliant one as well for the Euros, if you include Charlie Appleby and, of course, Aidan O'Brien in particular. They both had an outstanding meeting. Let's deal with some of their big winners. And if, as we go through this, there may be not that much to say, because some horses, obviously, we may not see again. We'll talk about that in a moment. But let's deal with one horse who won for the Breeders' Cup for the second successive year, first of all. And that's Modern Games in the mile. What did you make of that race?
Well, it did exceptionally well to win, didn't it, for a start? I mean, I think that the level of jockeyship we saw over the weekend from William Buick, obviously Ryan Moore, and to a lesser extent, obviously James Doyle. I mean, British riders were pretty exemplary in the main. I know events didn't work out particularly well for Holly Doyle for reasons that were quite explainable, but those three gentlemen were absolutely astonishing, I thought, all weekend. Tremendous fair, and I thought Modern Games did exceptionally well to overcome one or two issues and win quite cosily in the end. I mean, obviously Charlie Appleby had a brilliant two-day fixture as well, as much as Aidan O'Brien did, and Godolphin almost swept the board as well as Ballydoyle. So yeah, it was a tremendous weekend for those from this side of the American, this side of the Atlantic rather, and it certainly lit up with Modern Games and one or two sort of Godolphin winners on the card as well. I should imagine you had a great weekend, basically interviewing everybody that you knew.
Well, funny thing was, yes, it was good in that respect, but I barely backed a winner on turf. I actually didn't do too badly on the dirt, primarily because I was being given some stares by my colleagues. Let's stick to the Charlie Appleby success. Mischief Magic got the ball rolling on Friday when he won the first race.
Yeah,
Breeders' Cup. Incredible performance considering the way the race unfolded, particularly after the first furlong.
Yeah, I mean, 3 or 4 lengths detached, wasn't it, after a furlong? Obviously, they've gone a million up front, and those first breakdowns, those first sectionals, the 2 furlong and the 4 furlong section were pretty rapid, and that helped. But I thought William Buick did really well to keep him within his comfort zone for the early part of the race, and then obviously he's managed to finish off to good effect. Got that 6 furlong kick, and obviously you were at Kempton when you saw him win the Sirenia, and that kick from the top of the straight that day to win. just indicated that he had those gears, that he was capable of producing that turn of foot and that turn of speed, and that was very well employed at Keeneland over the weekend. I thought that was a tremendous performance. I mean, what sort of races would you be looking at next year? Commonwealth Cups, those sort of races?
Yeah, I'd imagine that will be the target. You'd imagine he'd run in that race, the Pavilion, is it?
Yeah.
I can't imagine he'd go for anything else. Pavilion, Commonwealth Cup, and then try and turn him into a top class sprinter. But I mean, obviously they've got Noble Style. Unless Noble Style stretches out to a mile, I kind of thought Noble Style was a sprinter, but maybe he is going to stretch out to a mile. So it'd be quite interesting. I think worthy of a mention in that race, obviously Dramatized ran brilliantly in second, but also Hollywood, I thought, ran a cracker at a massive prize for Alice Haynes. So of course, I know you had the pleasure of doing a feature with her earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, that was fantastic, really. I mean, other than just getting a little bit of a podium finish, that would have put the cherry on top of the cake, but it was still a fine run from Lady Hollywood to be there a furlong out and to be very competitive. I mean, it just shows you how quickly Alice Haynes has come through the ranks, and all of a sudden, 2 years pretty much after taking out a license, is now training horses and being very competitive with big price horses in a Breeders' Cup. It's been an astonishing ascent, really. Not quite on the George Bowie scale, but not far behind.
Yeah, a very impressive start to her training career. The other Charlie Appleby winner at the Breeders' Cup was Rebel's Romance. I find it hard to fathom where this horse has got to this season. I mean, last year he was going to go for the Belmont Stakes. At the beginning of this year, he was a Dubai World Cup horse. Now he's a top class mile and a half horse on the turf.
Yeah, extraordinary. I mean, when he was running around Goodwood and just edging past Kimari, you're starting to think, oh, okay, well, that's where he is. We can peg him as that. And then all of a sudden, he's shown an electric turn of foot to go and win a prize like that over the weekend. Great to give James Doyle his first win at the Breeders' Cup as well. So often that that backup rider for Godolphin. I mean, of course, some backup, isn't he? I mean, what a tremendous rider he is. But that sort of capped an unbelievable season for him with his classic success back in the spring. But this horse absolutely took off the home turn, didn't he? There was only one or two horses, I think, on that turf course that managed to do that weekend. Meditator, we'll probably talk about. But I thought that was an exceptional performance, and you'd have to think that trip back to Meydan, for the carnival would be very much on the agenda for him, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd imagine he'd be a shoe-in to contest whether he'd win it, but the Dubai Shima Classic would be definitely on the agenda. And also, let us never ever dismiss German Group 1s anymore. No. We're done with that after Alpinista and Rebels Romance, are we?
Well, that's the next. That could be the little bit of edge that one or two of the bloodstock agents are looking for, really, couldn't it? Now, I mean, they're all sort of looking to Japan and this and that, and trying to find an edge somewhere with bloodstock. But I mean, the Germans have often produced hardy horses, so it's not that easy to go over there and win these races. But he won 2, obviously, this summer. Alpinista built her confidence winning Group 1s over there before winning an ARC, and obviously there's been other high-profile winners come out of German wins, out of German victories, and won prestigious races in the last couple of years as well. So yes, it's a happy hunting ground for the Brits, and it's helping to breed confidence and breed future champions.
Absolutely. I'll just mention the turf sprint before we talk about Aidan O'Brien's success, because in the turf sprint, Caravel won. Big shock, 50-1, bigger for some people who were observing on certain exchanges before the off. But Emirati Anna ran well in defeat. Creative Force, unlucky. And Highfield Princess, I thought she ran a fine race.
She did.
Back and forth.
Yeah, was that a second winner on the weekend for Tyler Gaffalione, who had he gone sort of 35 rides at the Breeders' Cup without having one, and then like buses, 2 came at once. Fine ride off the front, wasn't it? Dictated terms and held enough in reserve to win late on from Emirati Anna, who was burrowing away up the far rail and just couldn't quite overhaul. It paid to be on the speed in that race. So I think Creative Force ran an absolute blinder. He came from another county, didn't he, to finish third, and he's going to be a very interesting sprinter if he stays in training for next year. For races at Ascot, you would think the 5 and 6 furlong races there. Another great run from Highfield Princess. She was up there, bang up there, but she just couldn't quite reproduce that form of that golden period in the summer where she won those 3 Group 1s in quick succession. And it's understandable. But if you'd said to me at the start of the year that she's going to be second favourite for the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint after winning a number of Group 1s. I thought, well, I'm not sure where you've got that from, but, you know, that's the actual logistics of it. And she did exceptionally well to carry her form through the summer, you know, to the back end and go to what looked a very ambitious plan at the start of those Group 1 victories, and was borne out that John Quinn and his team and Sean did an unbelievable job with her through the summer and early winter.
Yeah, I thought, given everything, you know, for a horse that was asked to peak for all-weather finals day earlier in the year, to do what she's done subsequently has been a remarkable season. I mean, she's one of the candidates for Horse of the Year in my book. Aidan O'Brien, outstanding. Obviously, everyone was going on about Charlie Appleby's strike rate at the Breeders' Cup, but Aidan O'Brien showed why he is one of the all-time greats. First of all, Meditate, who you've already given a brief mention to, that was hugely impressive. The only caveat to her impressive win was the quality of field that she beat. But I like the fact that she looks so comfortable over a turning mile, albeit an easier turning mile than she'll face when she heads down to, imagine, Newmarket and the Classics.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably put a little bit more flesh on the bones there with the quality of field, because I must admit, you know, that other than sort of Midnight Mile in fourth, who ran a really creditable race for the Fahey team, I haven't got a great deal of knowledge about a number of those other fillies. So you might just have had a little bit more of an inkling of what she beat, but she couldn't have beat them in any better fashion, could she? And just Ryan's body language through the race as well. He was happy to sit in the last third of the field, travel away, obviously ride her to get the trip, and Christ, she did get the trip, didn't she? She quickened magnificently and swept down the outside of them under minimal encouragement and won very, very cosily. 2.5 lengths, probably could have been 3 or 4, and there was a good gap back to the third as well. So it was a fine run from her. Whether she had to improve to go and win in that fashion is open to question, but it certainly pays a handsome compliment to Tahira anyway.
Indeed, Tahira of Dermot Wells, who looked winning the Moy Glare. But Meditate 6-1 with Bet365 for the Guineas next year. Aidan O'Brien's third winner came at the expense of Charlie Appleby's Silver Knot. Victoria Road just winning by a nose. Both horses ran brilliant races, and again, they were miles clear of their contemporaries stateside. The American horses couldn't lay a glove on them. Ryan Moore saying that he thinks he'll be more of a 3-year-old than a 2-year-old, could be a French Derby horse. The attitude of both horses I really enjoyed. The thing about Victoria Road, Sam, I thought he was still a little bit green.
Yes. Yeah, and Silver Knot, I mean, was trying to get, I mean, it was almost like he was trying to get behind wallpaper going down that rail, wasn't he? I mean, it was, the gaps were that thin, and that's what we saw from the great coverage from America, either NBC or wherever you consumed it. The overhead pictures were brilliant. They were very illuminating for race reading purposes, and it'd be nice to use a few more of those over here, I felt. But yeah, you could just see that William Buick was burrowing away, gaps that were barely there, and he was just slipping his way through those, through the eye of a needle, basically. And he was a bit unlucky, wasn't he? He had to sit and wait for a couple of strides where Victoria Road got first run. But as you say, Victoria Road might have just pulled itself up a little bit, and that might have just, you know, allowed Silver Knot to come and head him. But no, he just battled on very gamely and prevailed by a nose in the end. It was a terrific horse race.
Yeah, well, they're both probably classic contenders for next year. Where they end up, not too sure. One horse who was a classic contender this season and a winning a classic filly, Tuesday, who won the Oaks at Epsom. And it looked as if everyone was going on about Emily Upjohn, and lots of people were talking about Emily Upjohn, etc. Nashwa was in behind, but come the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf, Nashwa favourite, Tuesday available at much bigger odds. But Aidan O'Brien, you know, you doubt him. You doubt him at your peril. And I thought race tactics by the Coolmore Ballydoyle team were superb. I think the horse that made a running, they knew that would make the run, and they set Toy to sit to make sure that they went a decent pace, and Ryan Moore was in the perfect position, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. That Oaks form doesn't look so shabby now, does it? Everybody was cribbing it halfway through the summer, but obviously with the way that John Goslin's managed to get Emily Upjohn back, and you know, Tuesday is coming to win in America in the manner that she did, has just enforced it a little bit. And Nashua, of course, unfortunately, events didn't pan out over the weekend for Holly Doyle. She was trapped wide on the Platinum Queen in the opening race, could never really land a blow around that turn. And Nashwa was just slow to step from the gates. And we know that if you do that in America, it's a very, very difficult problem to overcome. And although Nashwa ran very creditably, she couldn't land a glove on Tuesday, who was given that perfect ride from Ryan Moore, just settled beautifully and quickened in the straight and came down the outside of them, won snugly. So no, real enforcement for the Oaks, and obviously the first three home of certainly paid it plenty of credence this year.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there, Sam. And you mentioned obviously Nashwa and Holly Doyle. I've seen one or two people criticising Holly Doyle for the ride on Nashwa. I thought that's pretty harsh, considering she missed the kick a bit, and then where she was. I mean, it's like having missed the kick, Holly Doyle can then go, right, well, I'm going to sit outside wide. She's in the position that she is, and then the finish really pick up. That's a ride I can't see how you can blame Holly Doyle for where Nashwa's finished in that race.
No, you've got to laugh at social media, people comparing Holly Doyle with Ryan Moore. I mean, Ryan Moore's been to countless Breeders' Cups, rides horses that, in some respect, those Ballydoyle horses are so well drilled. You never see any of them really sweating up, edgy. They're very calm to post. They just, I mean, obviously there's one or two exceptions, but they still go through the race traveling well. They're never keen. They're never exuberant, and Holly was riding the Platinum Queen, who was drawn 12, had never been round a bend on a race course before, I don't think. And, Nashwa, who stepped slowly, to judge her as a rider on those two rides was just, nonsensical, really. And to even pit her against Ryan Moore. I mean, she's at a very, very early stage of her Breeders' Cup career, isn't she, Holly Doyle? Whereas Ryan is a veteran of those meetings and she'll have gained a fair bit of experience from it. Events just didn't pan out, but, to actually categorise her as a poor Breeders' Cup rider on the back of two rides where one she had very little chance of and two events conspired against her. Well, that's just plainly ridiculous.
Absolutely. And we'll give a nod to a couple of other performers. Cody's Wish winning the Dirt Mile, the heartwarming story of the weekend, and Malathat, that fabulous finish in the distaff.
Oh, well, Cody's Wish, I've only just stopped blubbing. That was just one of the most emotional things I've ever seen, I think. I thought the coverage of it was incredible as well. I mean, what a story. I mean, that was just, this weekend had everything really, didn't it, in America? It had some brilliant performances and some real sort of heart-tugging moments, and none more so than that. That was just an incredible story. I bet you were fighting them back, those tears, Rishi. I know you're a very emotional, sensitive soul, and it was very difficult not to be deeply moved by that story. And that was a great race, wasn't it? Malathat and Blue Stripe and Claret, fighting out and diving for the line, the three of them. That was a terrific finish.
So I've been in tears since I got on the plane to go to the States. That's how soft I am. I was watching a movie on the plane, and I think it was one of the Marvel films, and I cried at that. So I know, yeah. Stop it.
Well, DIY SOS normally does for me. Not to mention the repair shop, so with no hope for us, is there?
And you can imagine how I cried when I found out that the winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic, Flightline, has been retired. He's going to stand at Lane's End Stud. Brilliant, an absolutely brilliant performance. But of course, there's a lot to talk about with the retirement, his position in the status of all-time greats. I mean, I don't know. Where would you start with him? I mean, obviously the performance worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as some of the all-time greats.
Well, I find it very difficult because I'm not necessarily attuned to the figures and how to compare these horses. It's certainly not my strength. There's a lot of smarter minds out there that are more capable of doing that than me. Obviously, the Belmont performance, I think, gave him one of the greatest Bayer figures for the last 3 decades. So that was obviously a fair idea, or certainly a fair recommendation for his abilities and where he stood in the pantheon of greats. Obviously, we've only seen him 6 times. He was a 19-20 length winner at Del Mar, obviously, and then he's a wide margin winner of Keeneland's Grade 1, the classic on Saturday. So I find him difficult to compare with, the greats of our game, the Frankels of this world, and Baid, if you want to throw him into the equation, but I'm not sure he's been mentioned in the conversation. And Secretariat, who was actually beaten 5 times, wasn't he, in a 21 race career, but produced some absolute jaw-dropping moments like Flightline's managed.
Yeah, it's one that, you know, I think everybody. The thing is, I suppose being a great is such a subjective thing. What you believe is great. You know, I prefer the repetition over a series of performances. You know, not just. I mean, he's produced 2 performances that mark him down as an all-time great. That might be enough for some people, but 6 starts overall as a package. I'd love to have seen him race on and see how. There's always a new challenger. There's always a new challenger, whether you know, that new challenger is up to scratch. But it'd be nice to see him race on. But you did mention one phrase that I think is very apt here for this particular juncture. You said, smarter minds than me. So I thought, with that in mind, it's time to use a smarter mind than both of us. That is for sure. His name is Paul Ferguson. He is the author of Jumpers to Follow. Paul, welcome to Racing Weekly. First of all, I'll ask if you watched any of the Breeders' Cup, and if you did, your thoughts on Flightline.
Morning, Rishi. Morning, Sam. Thanks for the kind introduction. Not sure I can live up to that billing. That was the one race I did catch on Saturday. Like Sam, I was brave in the elements. I was at Aintree in the cold and wet. Once he had the mishap of brewing up a storm coming down early at first, I was straight off to Goodison Park. So again, no mention of football, please, in this direction. And then by the time I drowned my sorrows and got back, I think I caught Flightline. Yeah, I thought it was a really good performance. I think that obviously the way the race unfolded was not too many from him behind got into the race, and like Sam, I wouldn't confess to being too knowledgeable about the in-depthness of what the form was worth, but visually it was very impressive. Again, can you match him up to the likes of Frankel, who done it over a longer period of time? For me, would be questionable. But again, I'd say certainly it was impressive on the eye, at least, anyway.
But just one question for both of you. I'll start with you, Paul. If he were yours, if you had the majority shareholding in Flightline, would you race on or would you send him to stud?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask. I'd be sending him to Newbury for a maiden hurdle at the Hennessy meeting. So. But, yeah, it certainly would be nice to have seen him race a little more than he has, as Sam already alluded to.
Sam?
Commercial reasons, you've got to send them to stud, haven't you, Rish? I don't think there's any other alternative really, unless you've got that much money.
Even if he were yours, I understand the commercial reasons, but if you owned him as Sam Turner, you'd be thinking of the commerce behind the decision, or would you be thinking of?
Well, I think how much prize money? How much prize money has he already won? I think that'd be enough to pay off my mortgage. Put it that way. So I'd probably be in it for the sport, to be honest, Rish. Especially if you underwrote with all your wealth his next season and ensured that, you know, I got $1 million, whatever happened, then that'll be fine. I'd race on just to keep you happy.
Well, genuinely, I actually thought that'd be one of the things, because he's got that status. Remember when Tiger Woods became the best golfer in the world? He was commanding fees to play in tournaments. Flightline could command fees to turn up and race. I mean, I thought they could have done anyway. Look, they're not going to.
How many mares could he cover? 100, 150?
Yeah, imagine that would be around 150 his first book.
And how much is he going to, you know, how many?
Probably 150 again. 150 times 150 grand.
Yeah, do the math.
Yeah, there you go. There's your answer.
Yeah.
And he's won 3.5 million in earnings. So.
Yeah. All right. It's all about the money, as who is it? Jesse J said.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Your favourite artist.
I got there in the end. Let's put Paul's mind to the test now, though, Paul. We've spoken a lot about flat racing, a lot about the Breeders' Cup, but there was also some wonderful racing over jumps over the weekend. For me, Frodon takes headlines because he is just a remarkable horse, and of course the way he goes about it with Bryony Frost riding him so well, they've got a wonderful relationship as a major partnership in the sport. What did you make of his performance at Wincanton in the Badger Beer?
Yeah, I don't think any fan of national hunt racing. I think that's one of the things really about the contrasts between the two sports, and the fact that the horses do stay in training longer. People have an association and affiliation with horses like Frodon, who we see year in, year out. That was the only race I actually watched live from Aintree. And I say there was a good reaction on course to his performance there. So obviously watched it back again on Sunday morning in a little bit more detail. And yeah, it was visually, again, it was really good to see. And talking about facts and figures and things and numbers and stuff, it's just great to see like the likes of him and even Greatwood the day before, these top class horses, Grade 1 horses, contesting off top weight in handicaps. I know a lot of older racing fans like ourselves like to see it happen, but it really does add something to these races. And I think you could tell from a fair way out that he was going to win the race. And one I think who's probably worth flagging up and behind was Captain Ord, who eventually finished third. And watching it back, he was actually hampered. I think it was fairly early on down the back straight when Enrillo came down. And although you would say it was a fair way from home, it probably checked his momentum at maybe at an important time. So again, we know Christian does a fantastic job at this day in handicap chases, so he's probably another one to take out the race.
All right. Just briefly before I go to Sam, King George hopes for Frodon. I mean, he is a part.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Paul Nicholls has got half a night. I mean, he is entered in the Betfair Chase as well. So, and there's only 6 in that. And knowing how Paul's mind works, if that cut up a little bit, he'd be happy to sort of hunt around and get 2nd or 3rd place prize money. But yeah, I mean, the King George looks the ideal opportunity for him to go and run his race under conditions that should suit him. There isn't a lot of strength in depth in the race, I don't think, at the moment. Obviously, you have Allaho, you have Brave Man's Game, Envoy Allen after the weekend will probably go there as well. But the support cast wouldn't be of the highest quality or the stiffest competition. So, yeah, Frodon's entitled to go there, isn't he?
Yeah, I'd imagine he is. I'm just quickly bringing up the odds here on Bet365. He's 16 to 1 at the moment. Allaho 6 to 4. Brave Man's Game 2 to 1. Long Presse a generous 7s, I'd say at the moment. But we come back to that. Okay, so that's Frodon in the Badger Beer. Also on Saturday, Naples Hill upset So Royal, who'd won the Elite Hurdle, 3 times before, the first time in 2016. Sam, I'll start with you here on Naples Hill. Is it just a case of the momentum going with Paul Nicholls at this time of the season? And he's got a horse here who is improving quite quickly over hurdles.
He is. I mean, it was a magnificent weekend for his owner, Paul Vogt, who obviously Naples Hill, Frodon, and then had a winner on Sunday at Sandown and Halo de Zobo as well. So 3 winners on a couple of days. And Naples Hill was a little bit like Greatwood the day before, obviously fit, really ready to rock and roll in a race where there didn't look a lot of early pace with a number of hold-up horses, even in the select field. So Harry Cobden keen on his birthday to bounce out. He'd already had a crunching fall on Enrillo when he was travelling very well in the Badger Ale. So I thought that, that was a brilliant ride on Naples Hill, who didn't miss a beat at his hurdles. So Royal came to threaten him, but just couldn't lay a glove on him really in the straight. And he ran out a very comfortable winner. He enjoyed the good ground. It was probably just a touch on the fast side, even for So Royal. The rain didn't come in the quantity that they wanted. In the morning, there was a few non-runners through the card, but it was just about safe enough. And Naples Hill followed up that Chepstow run, which is starting to work out quite nicely with a victory on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to talk about the Greatwood Hurdle a little bit later on in the show. Naples Hill is still in that, Paul, but he's had a very good start to the season so far. I mean, how realistic are his hopes for achieving, graded success over hurdles? And could he potentially? I know it's a long way off. He's 33 to 1 with Bet365 for the champion hurdle. Could he turn into that kind of horse, Paul?
He's probably his mark after Saturday. He'll be verging on taking his chance, certainly in a trial. I'd echo Sam's sentiments about that. I thought it was a fantastic ride by Harry Cobden on Saturday. And just in general, we know Paul's horses are absolutely flying, but Harry is riding at the top of his game, I think, at the minute. And another thing that should be noted about Naples Hill is if you look at the transformation in his hurdling technique from where he was this time last year, he scrambled home. He was obviously a top bump horse the season before. He scrambled home at Chepstow. Although, again, the runner-up Pickard's come out and won this season. So, again, maybe that form wasn't as weak as we thought it was at the time. But his hurdling, as Sam said, he barely, I think his only semblance of a mistake was he got in a little bit tight at the last. But I thought the fractions that Harry set, he just got everything spot on from the front. So you would imagine, I think Paul thinks he's better on decent ground. Maybe he'd be in for a little midwinter break now, and maybe come back for something like the Kingwell over course and distance. See if he's up to that level. It's often a small field, and if you're riding him from the front like that, you're going to test horses out in behind certainly.
Just to put on that, chaps, I think Paul is quite keen just to test the water and see whether he has got a potential champion hurdle horse. I wouldn't be surprised to see him in something like the Beulah. Because I sort of mentioned to him on Saturday, Christmas hurdle, will that come into calculations? He was saying, well, there might be a race for him before then, so yeah, it might go there. And then I think Aintree 2.5 for that race there. That might be the opportunity he has to win a Grade One.
He obviously won his bumper Aintree, didn't he? Won the Grade Two for a couple of years ago, and we've seen at Chepstow he stayed to 2.5 miles as he showed last year. So probably enter equations, like you say. We know Paul isn't averse to skipping Cheltenham and heading up here for the big meeting.
All right. I'll mention Grand Sefton and Aintree as the last race I think we'll focus on, which obviously a brilliant win for Al Dancer, who held on. I thought he was going to get beaten halfway up the running by Gaskill, but he held on. Obviously, well done to Sam Thomas, but also poignantly for Di Walters, who we all here at Racing Weekly and everybody in the sport sending Di Walters our very best wishes. Moved to intensive care after the helicopter crash late last week, so we are keeping our fingers crossed for his recovery. But a fabulous race, Sam. I really thought Gaskill was going to get there and just nab him on the line.
Yeah, it was a terrific race. I sort of watched it on the screens. Obviously, Paul was there, I think, and I thought it was a brilliant training performance from Sam Thomas. He's really hit the ground running at the start of the season. I think he's got chances this weekend at Cheltenham as well, and it was quite a subdued, I wouldn't say it was lackluster, but it was quite a subdued start to his training career. But this sort of unity with Di Walters, and the fact that he moved down there to that yard just outside Cardiff and had some good patronage, some lovely horses to train, really come into his own in the last 2 or 3 years, unveiled some really talented young talent, and also his handicap chasers have started to go through the grades and win very well. This was a brilliant piece of target training, and it's good to see him hold on. It was a bit frustrating, obviously, for local connections. Ollie Greenall got good ties with the track, and I'm sure they were absolutely gutted to get beaten nose, but it was a fantastic horse race.
So, being fortunate enough to be there, Paul, what was it like?
Well, it was, fantastic race, as Sam said. Close finish. I think maybe if the rain would have arrived a little bit sooner than it did, I think that might have helped the runner-up. I think softer ground would certainly. He doesn't look a horse who's lacking for stamina. He stayed on really well, I thought. But I thought Al Dancer showed a fine resolution, something perhaps we haven't always seen in the past from him. Again, going back to his early days, he was a good bumper horse. I think he contested that Grade 2. I think he finished 4th maybe in an Aintree going back a few years now. That's probably as far as he wants to go as well. I think that's just the furthest he's won over 2.5. So I don't think there'll certainly be any aspirations of him going up any further in trip. Maybe he took well to the fences. Maybe he's one we'll see come back in April for the Topham.
Yeah. A whole host of other smart performers were out over the weekend, Friday through to Sunday. I'll mention a few of them, and I'll let both of you have a go who you'd like to reflect on very briefly. There was Hang In There, who wins again over the fences for Emma Lavelle. American Mike, everyone excited about what he might do this season. I think he's 7-1 favourite for the Albert Bartlett. Grenadine, who won the Holden Gold Cup. Pied Piper, who won for the second time this season, is clearly a live contender for the champion hurdle now. Mighty Potter, even Metier, one for the Jump Boys winning the November Handicap. Who would you like to mention from that, Paul? And maybe you've got something else that you'd like to put in the mix from the weekend.
Yeah, obviously it was good to see American Mike come out and win as he did. I perhaps wasn't as blown away as many as some people were. I'd like to be willing to see him. Like to see him maybe improve his hurdling technique next time out. I think there's different opinions of him. To me, he looked more of a stayer. Just to my eye on that evidence, but I know Jack Kennedy said afterwards that he thinks the faster they go, the quicker his jumping will improve. So that'll be interesting to take forward. On the same card, Mighty Potter is probably as high up my pecking order of novice chasers to follow pre-race. And again, maybe I was slightly underwhelmed by the performance. I think I was expecting a little bit more from him. He still looked big, green and raw to me. He was looking around at his fences, but he didn't do much wrong. And again, I think I would expect him to take a big step forward. Something like the Drim More Novice Chase might come under consideration for him. At Aintree on Saturday, I thought there was a couple of notable performances, to be honest. The opening novice hurdle was won by a horse called Man at Work, who was a faller in what was arguably the strongest 4-year-old maiden point-to-point from last spring, a horse called Barry the Butcher. Won that race. There's a lot of talk about him. He's now in training with Henry the Bromhead and is heading down the bumper route. And runner-up that day was Croke Park, who was bought for 410,000 by Jigginstown at the Aintree sale. Again, I think he's going to start off in a bumper. So it was nice in a way to see Man at Work was the first of the main protagonists from that race. He was a faller when he probably would have finished third, and he was the first of the main protagonists to run the rules. So again, that form is looking pretty solid. Remastered, I thought, ran a fine trial for the Hennessy, or the Coral Gold Cup as it is now, winning well in the attempts. And even though there was only 4 runners in it, I thought the novice handicap chase was a really good race, won by Dr. Ken. But Rioja there was probably one to take out going forward. He jumped well on his chase debut, and I think would be difficult to beat next time.
Okay, Sam, what about you? Anything from the weekend that we've mentioned, or one of them?
Just one horse at Dan Royal, really. I mean, the King of Kingsfield, who I think became the 9th winner in 10 years, or the last decade of that bumper at Dan Royal, to be won by Elliott, and most notably of recent times, Jamie Codd. Now, if you look down the roll call of horses that have won that race, American Mike started there, Sir Gerhard, Easy Work, Death Duty. So it's got a pretty prestigious roll call, and the Jungle Drums were definitely banging about this horse before he ran. He was 4-9. He only had 5 rivals. He won quite comfortably in the end, but they certainly felt that he was a little bit of an aeroplane. So he might be one just to keep on board. I think he's almost as short as 8 or 10 to 1 for the champion bumper already, and you probably know he's going to go the tried and trusted path even that Gordon Elliott used with American Mike and Sir Gerhard. But he's obviously a very talented individual, and Gordon obviously likes to start them off at that meeting as well. So he could pay to keep on side this year.
Okay, so there's some names to remember from both Sam and Paul from the weekend. And that wraps up. I'll look back at what we've seen, obviously, in the States and here in the UK from a jumping perspective. But now on Racing Weekly, we're going to switch our attentions to what's coming up at Cheltenham this weekend. Right, back on Racing Weekly, we're looking ahead to the weekend. Before we get into our preview for the weekend, just to let you know of Bet365's ITV racing offer. If you back a winner at 4-1 or more, place a bet on the next live ITV race and get your money back if it loses. That money's back up to £50 and applies to the first single bet placed. Obviously, T's and C's apply, new and eligible customers only. Okay. The big race on Saturday, the big race of the open meeting at the Cheltenham Festival, is the Paddy Power Gold Cup. Take a brief look at the betting with Bet365. We'll have French Dynamite at the top of the market at 13-2. A couple of horses at 8-1, including Stolen Silver. We mentioned Sam Thomas, of course. Willie Mullins has got Fan de Bleu. Midnight River, who won for the Skelton team. Nichols's Il Rodotto. So I'll start here with you, Paul. I guess it's whatever you're looking, whatever way you look at the race, already wary of what is declared from Ireland.
Yeah, I know. I've got one eye. Sorry, I had one eye on the. We're recording now just before lunchtime, and Willie's hasn't actually been confirmed as yet. So he's got a few minutes left to do it. So whether he's actually in there or not, it remains to be seen. He'd actually be one. I wouldn't be rushing myself. He'd had enough chances earlier in his career. So he's obviously won his last 2, but he was down in trip for those around the 2 mile 1 mark. So I think he's had plenty of chances. And normally for the likes of this race, these early season handicaps, I like to look at a second season chaser and an improving type who's quite lightly raced. All
right, who's taking your eye?
One, I think, is an obvious one for any shortlist. Jamie Snowden's been in flying form at the start of the season. Garlaw, he's still only a 6-year-old. Made his comeback recently in the Old Roan Chase, where he was an eye-catcher staying on in 3rd and wasn't beaten too far behind Riders on the Storm and Hitman. those two performers, obviously Virgin on Grade 1 class, who's receiving a good bit of weight from them, but that was his first start in 603 days. If he steps forward from that, obviously from the same mark, we don't know what his, he'll run off the same mark, but he will be reassessed tomorrow morning by the handicapper. So I would imagine that he'll be slightly ahead of where he should be in the handicap. It's just a question of whether he can replicate that kind of form 20 days later, having had the long layoff. But I say Jamie's in fine form at the moment. He had a nice winner at Sandown yesterday, Colonel Harry. And I know this has been the long-term target for him since he came back in with his injury. So I would expect Garlow to go well.
Okay, he's 8-1 for the Gold Cup on Saturday. Sam, any horses that are really screaming, back me, back me?
Stolen Silver, Rish, Stolen Silver. Should just start with a bit of a weather update. 14 mil on Sunday, good to soft as we record. 2 to 3 millimeters on Monday, 3 to 4 on Tuesday, maybe a passing shower on Wednesday, and then largely dry through Thursday through to Sunday as well. So racegoers should have the best of it, between 14 and 16 degrees as well. So should be very pleasant racing at Presby Park over the weekend. Yeah, Stolen Silver, he's finished twice off long breaks. He's finished third to Eldorado Allen over 2 miles, and he's also won after a 190-day break. Just to echo Paul's thoughts, Sam Thomas has also made a very good start with first-time out horses as well this year, which I like. That the yard seemed very forward. I thought his best sort of performances came at Cheltenham, not least last time over 2.5 back in that Silver Cup in the April at that on good ground in that spring meeting there where he beat Simply the Bets. Strode really nicely clear of him after the last as well to win by 10 or 11 lengths. The two of them were going head to head over the second last and the last. So to put good distance between himself and Simply the Bets was encouraging. I think his Cheltenham record and completed starts, second, fourth, first. If we're talking about good ground, that's perfect over 2.5. It's obviously, a race that Sam Thomas has thought about targeting, because he finished second in a handicap chase at this meeting last year behind Editor de Gite, who I think is also very much one for the shortlist after his eye-catching comeback here at the last meeting when held up. And he's normally a horse that is quite positively ridden. So I thought that was a nice little look-see, and he should be a lot sharper for the outing as well, with Niall Houlihan probably likely to ride. So those two were the ones that caught my eye to start with, Rishi.
All right, we're going back, Sam, we're going back live to our reporter, Paul Ferguson, to bring us an update on declarations for the race. Because I would like to know, Paul, as we'll obviously be recording this edition of Racing Weekly, and I wanted to know whether your finger on the pulse and able to tell us what is the latest, as we just past declaration time, have we?
Yeah, just about. No, it doesn't look like Van der Blues is in. So
okay.
Editor de Gite and Mr. Fisher currently at the top. Simply the Bets is in yet. So
all right, is Happy Go Lucky in there?
He is, yeah. He is.
He's a horse I've always liked, and remember he ran an absolute blinder at Cheltenham in last year, March, not 2022, 2021, and then he won at Aintree, and then we haven't seen him since. And I thought it was quite a big ask for him to come back. Obviously, Kim Bailey's horse is running pretty well at the moment. Just to see how he gets on, because he was a really forward-going individual. Probably his best form would be over slightly further. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. But as you say, after a layoff, I think he's quite a keen going sort. So, and like you say, he likes to get on with things from the front. So I think maybe forceful tactics over this kind of distance. Certainly, again, like Sam said, he's another one with good course form. That would be one slight concern I'd have about Garlow. Perhaps the pick of his form is on flat track. So it's a little bit of an unknown there. I think Il Rodotto, just given the form, again, we've touched upon of Paul Nicholls and Harry Copland. I think he obviously deserves a mention. Again, arguably the pick of his form from last year was on flatter tracks, and he looked like he needed the first start. He was beaten behind Warlord at Newton Abbot, but then he absolutely bolted up at the Hennessy meeting early season. But again, I think this has been a long-term aim, so I don't think there should be any fitness worries coming out to ditch it. That's for sure. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Hitman a year ago, in that is perhaps maybe he's a little bit weak and he's still going to need a bit of time to fill his frame and fulfill his potential. But I certainly think from a mark of 140, whether it's Saturday or not, I think he will land a nice handicap at some stage.
Yeah, Paul Nicholls obviously trained the last 5-year-old to win the race, which was Kay de Burle a few years ago, who came with that strong run late on in the race. So that's definitely something to bear in mind for Il Rodotto. We'll move on and talk about the Greatwood. And again, Paul Nicholls' name features heavily with regards to the betting. But seeing that my reporter is live on the scene again, you can just keep us in the loop, Paul, about who isn't in the race. Obviously, Paul Nicholls, according to the market, had a couple at the top there. What's the latest news on that?
It looks like Napper's Hill hasn't been confirmed. Golden Sun hasn't been. I believe Golden Sun's gone to. I think he might go to Otoy for the champion 4-year-old hurdle. I think that's coming up in the next week or so. Maybe Sam spoke to Paul about that while he's seen him over the weekend. I'm not sure. West Cork, and I like to move it at the minute. Look like they're going to top the weights.
Is Sonagino and Hacker de Place in there?
Sonagino is, yeah. Hacker de Place.
Both for Paul Nicholls. Sonagino's already won twice this season. This is great. Live. Well, it's not live by the time.
Live Dex Watch.
Yeah.
Live recording.
I'll probably get in trouble for this if any of my bosses are watching from Wetherby. So we've gone 12 now at CMC, aren't we? And by the time this goes live, obviously they'll all be public and be public knowledge. No
trouble for you whatsoever.
Yeah, Hacker de Place. No, he doesn't look like he's in. No.
Okay, so Paul Nicholls with Sonagino, who's likely to be the market leader here, Sam. Whilst my reporter gathers his thoughts, I'll come to you for some analysis on this race. Are you with Paul Nicholls' Sonagino? Do you see something else of interest?
I think he's very much shortlist material because he's a horse that they thought quite a lot of last year, and he just looks as though a bit of remedial work with his wind and the fact that he's just grown up a little bit of really worked the Oracle this year. A couple of wins at Chepstow, and he's done it in really good fashion. So, yeah, I think he's an obvious sort of starting point, really. I don't know whether this has been declared or not, or entered First Street, whether he's down to run, Paul. You can perhaps tell me, but yeah, I thought his second to State Man was nearly enough the best form in the race, to be honest. We're talking State Man has been a champion hurdle prospect this year. The fact that he raced on his own, turning for home on the inside of the track, where the State Man and one or two of the others made a beeline for the standside rail in the county hurdle, and he kept galloping, kept staying on nicely. That came on the back of a really good third in the Betfair hurdle, where he missed the last two hurdles out and still had the quality to finish in within 3 lengths of the winner. Very lightly raced horse. He's got a ton of weight. He's got 12 stone, which isn't ideal, obviously, in this race, because I think stats will tell you that the lightly rated or the lightly weighted horses have a better record. But he looks the class act, and understandably, he has got top weight, judged on that State Man performance, which I thought was a really good one.
Yeah, not confirmed, sorry, Sam, but you made a sterling.
I know it's not Nicky's plan, is it, to run horses under top weight and handicaps?
Yeah. At this stage, to say it looks like only of the top weighted horses I like to move it, and West Cork who have been confirmed.
Okay. What do you like in the race then, Paul?
As Sam's already covered, Sonagino, really, I think obviously he's probably shortlist material for anyone. He's gone up £10. I think he only ran last week at Chepstow to make sure his rating was probably high enough to ensure that he got in. But the way the weighted race looks like it's kind of unfolding, I'm not sure it's perhaps a stronger renewal as it has. Although the past couple of years, to be honest, it's not quite the race that it once was. The Greatwood, it's not really the champion hurdle trial that we once saw with the likes of Rooster Booster and things. But if Sonagino is likely to turn up, and I'm sure he'll go off favourite, as Sam's touched upon, seems to be an improved performer this year. Hasn't done much wrong at all. Looked to have plenty left in the tank last time. Has had an easy enough lead in both his races. So whether different tactics we'll see, the different results will remains to be seen. But I say he's one who everyone should have on the list, and one I like. Again, I would normally have gone with what Sam's saying in this race, that you want something a bit lower in the weights, but I think if those confirmations are correct and we're only looking at low 140s towards the top, I think that's a different kettle of fish then. I think it's a lesser quality of race, and then the horse is able to carry a bigger weight. The one there, again, for the shortlist, another lightly raced 5-year-old. And as form, who ties in with First Street is I Like to Move at Nigel Twiston-Davis's. He won a couple of times at this track early last season in the autumn at the October and November meeting. He won the Grade 2 novice hurdle at this fixture last year. He then he disappointed in the Kennel Gate, but he returned to run an absolute blind. He was beating just a short head in the Betfair. He did disappoint in that same race, the County Hurdle, but perhaps that came at the end of a long season for him. And from a mark of 142, solid course form, solid handicapping form. I had a quick look before we came on air, and I think he was around 14 to 1. If he was still around that price, once we go to air, I think he'd be a decent each way bet, and you'd certainly get a run for your money with him.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry to jump in. Yeah, I felt that he probably faced an impossible task in the County Hurdle. He was ridden very aggressively, wasn't he? He was sat second, and
not ideal in that race.
You can't do that in that race, surely. You've got to take your time and whatever. The only other one I'd like to mention, I'm very much in the camp that I think I like to move it and run really well. You know, given connections, given his form around Cheltenham, it's an obvious starting point for him. The other one I'd quite like to mention is about a 14 to 1 chance of Alan King's Call of the Wild, who hasn't got a lot of experience. I think he's only had, five, six starts over hurdles, but he caught the eye at the Ascot in that comeback behind Highway 102. Certainly paid to be up in the van that day. Highway 102 never saw another rival and was given a really fine ride from the front that day. And Call of the Wild just stayed on in his own time, just caught the eye, you know, not doing a great deal in the straight, and he's actually comes here, you know, very lightly raced horse off 129, which I think is quite interesting, certainly given his connections, and be interesting to see whether he's lining up. Paul, I don't know whether he's been confirmed or not, but he's got a bit of Cheltenham form as well, thanks to that run over 2.5 miles behind Pull Again Green.
Yeah, he hasn't. Sorry, Sam, you've put up another non-runner.
There you go.
It's a running
Get the powder dry.
Yeah, that's it. We're all in on I Like to Move it now, and any straightforward.
Yeah.
It's on a G. There you go. Yeah.
Go on then, Put. The only other one, as I'm having a load of darts and none of them are actually landing on the board. Cormier, is that running?
Yeah, I'm sure I've seen him. I'm sure he was. Where are we?
Okay.
He has been confirmed. Yeah. Go on, make your case.
9 lengths behind State Man in the county. Travelled as well as anything, turning for home, just couldn't quicken with some very well handicapped horses. But you know, he's running this race before, I think, and hasn't run too badly at all. So he'd be a big price as well. He'd be my throwaway suggestion at a big price.
Okay, I'm going to mention one other race at Cheltenham specifically, which will be on Sunday in the Schlur. The likelihood of seeing Edward Stone taking on Nuba Negra, the Arkle winner. Nuba Negra, a previous runner-up in the Queen Mother Champion Chase. Any thoughts on those two horses and what you were hoping that Edward Stone does, maybe, Paul, for this season? Whether he could potentially become, a proper Queen Mother Champion Chase winning contender?
Well, I think he's the Arkle winner, so you have to take him seriously to begin with as a 2 mile. I would say, without any disrespect to the connections of the horses in the division last year, it ended up being a weakish enough division, the 2 mile novice chase division, I thought. But he was very much a worthy winner. And again, I would probably say he was campaigned. It was great to see, to be honest. He was campaigned quite aggressively last year, and it might have been one start too many for him at Aintree. So it'd be interesting to see how he fared up if matching up against Gentleman to Me again, which I'm sure he will do at some stage in the season. I think this is the obvious starting point. But if the ground is on the decent side, I think conditions would be absolutely ideal for Nuba Negra. We know he goes well fresh. He's all about speed. He was really impressive in the race last year. I would think he would probably take a bit of beating if conditions remain as they are.
Yeah, Sam, I mean, Edward Stone's 16 to 1 with Bet365 for the Champion Chase at the moment. Nuba Negra 33 to 1.
I think Nuba Negra is just a horse that's best, caught fresh, isn't he? He's better undercooked. He's got a good record off a break. I think he's won off a 200-day break. I think he's won off a 323-day break and a 173-day break. Good ground, as Paul says. If it is genuinely that come Sunday, that really does play to his strengths and the possibility of a small field as well. I don't think he'd mind that in the slightest. So he'd just have the edge for me. But Edward Stone was a horse that I bought pretty much until he started going over fences to back him in all those handicap hurdles. He'd run on, finished third, fourth. He became a bit more versatile tactics-wise over fences, and it paid off. He was up in the van a little bit more, and his jumping usually put him to the sword a bit.
Yeah, I'm certain I lost money on him in the Greatwood a few seasons Yes, he owes me, but as usual, you miss the good days and you're all there for the bad ones.
I'd just add there that I think the fact that Alan King has mentioned the possibility already of going up in trip, just kind of think maybe that is an option. He did run up to 2.5 miles over hurdles as well, so
Exactly.
I think it's a possibility that maybe after Sunday we might see him step up in distance. But I say at this stage he obviously is the Narcle winner, so deserves to be treated as a contender for the champion chase.
All right, I'm going to throw it out as we come to the closing stages of this episode. Just throw it out there for anything else running on the weekend, and you in particular, Paul, because I know there's one horse that you and I are in sync on, and he may run this weekend.
Yeah, that's in the Mayor's Bumper on Saturday. Again, I had a quick look at the entries before we started recording. She's in there, Queen's Gamble, filly trained by Oliver Sherwood, was hugely impressive at the April meeting in winning a bumper on good ground. There's actually 3 of my 40 leading prospects, Elsa Jumpers to follow, being entered for the race, so it could be a hot race. The other 2 I'll just touch upon quickly are Maleficent of John Joe O'Neill's. She ran once in Ireland when trained by Lorna Fowler and made a winner debut for the New Connections in Taking Fashion at Uttoxeter. She'll obviously need to take a step forward, but she's got a bit of race fitness on side. The other one was a filly of Nicky Henderson's called Lucia, who won the listed bumper on Imperial Cup Day at Sandown by, I think, 17 lengths, if my memory is correct. She was a wide margin winner anyway on bad ground, but she's actually bred to appreciate much better ground, so I wouldn't be too concerned about quicker ground. I think that could actually improve her. She looks like she could be top class, to be honest. So if she turns up, I think she's probably the one to beat in that bumper.
Okay, brilliant. Sam, any thoughts elsewhere for the weekend?
Yeah, looking forward, if it does venture across the Irish Sea, to see Banbridge.
Yeah,
yours again. That novices limited handicap chase. Real sparkling performance over fences first time up, and obviously the winner of the Martin Pipe at the Cheltenham Festival in March. So yeah, he's one of my horses to follow this year. So hopefully he can continue his education in a positive light.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon him as well. He was certainly, like, from a mark of 143, he's only £6 higher than when he won the Martin Pipe. There was a couple in there against him. Pull Again Green, I thought, would be an interesting opponent. I thought he shaped like he needed to run badly on his chase debut in against more experienced horses. And I had him down. He had a £7 pull with Found On, but she's actually been declared to run at Bangor in the Mayor's Chase on Wednesday, so I don't think she'll be going on Friday. So those 2, and one more, sorry, to keep this rolling, I had one more noted just from Friday. He's got 2 entries. A horse called Astigar, who we haven't actually seen since March 2021, trained by David Pipe. Obviously, David's having a fine time of it at the moment. He won the first 2 races at Aintree on Saturday. This horse finished second on 3 completed starts, but it's good form. He only got a mark of 118. David Pipe, and going back even further, Martin Pipe used to have a tremendous record in the conditional jockeys race, which opens this meeting. He's won it 3 times since 2013, and in 2014, Unique Ducot won this race after a 640-day layoff. So I just wonder if maybe this has been the plan since he came back in. He's certainly interesting anyway. He's entered in the novices handicap over a shorter trip later on the card, but he's from his pedigree certainly suggests that going up in trip would suit. So just he's probably worth noting in the early markets on Thursday evening if he runs on Friday.
I'd love to see love the memories of the days when there was a David Johnson, was even David Pipe, well weighted, well punted, and almost certain winner. Just before we close it off, though, and I know what we really want is for people to go and get your book, Paul. That's the most important thing, that they buy your book. But if you were to give them one from your book, just one horse, and I know you've given quite a few that are running potentially this weekend, but something maybe a little bit obscure that people wouldn't have automatically thought about, but one horse out of that book that we should be paying attention to, what would it be?
Well, I think I'll go away from the obvious. You could sit here and talk about all the potential graded novices and things. And obviously it's probably better one that hasn't run yet. Let's go with Tara Muhara, trained by Emma Lavelle. He ran twice last year. He's got a nice pedigree. He's half brother to a horse called See the World. And if you remember him, Sam winning a bumper at Wincanton when
Wincanton,
he run halfway off the track with Aidan. He was on the car park.
Never fulfilled that potential, did he?
No. So I'm hoping this lad does certainly goes on a bit more. But he looked good when he won. It was a weak enough race. He won at Chepstow at the end of the season, but he's only got a mark of 108. He could have gone down the handicap hurdle route, but I was pleased to read in Emma Lavell's stable tour recently that he's going to go straight over fences, and he would be one to note in a novice handicap chase from a mark of 108.
All right. Good name to mention there for us. Paul, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I hope that there are a whole host of winners coming from the book this weekend in particular, especially for me with Queen's Gambit, should she be declared to run for Oliver Sherwood in the bumper on the weekend at Cheltenham. Sam, it's great to see you once again. Looking forward to the rest of this series on Racing Weekly as we build up to a wonderful jumps season leading to the Cheltenham Festival. It should be a lot of fun along the way. I hope you can join us all. But that is it for this episode of Racing Weekly, brought to you by oddschecker in association with Bet365. Many thanks to Sam and Paul for joining me on this episode. As always, if you've liked what you've seen or heard in this or any of our previous episodes, then leave us a kind, positive review on Apple Podcasts or in the comments section on YouTube. Next week, we're going to be back. Our special guest next week is Gavin Lynch, and we'll be in the studio. We'll be face-to-face once again, so we'll be able to look at each other while we take the mickey out of each other on the way as well. So thank you very much for joining us on Racing Weekly. We are proud to be back for the jump season, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.